In the remotest northern reaches of England lies a small, seemingly unremarkable lake known once as Bolam Bog. Set within a vast 65-hectare park, this area thrives with red squirrels darting through trees and deer roaming the open spaces. But there's a darker reputation that clings to this place, whispers of a presence beyond the usual wildlife. Since the early 1990s, numerous visitors have recounted eerie sightings of a towering, shadowy figure with hulking fangs and eyes that glow like embers in the dark. Could it be that the untamed corners of Northumberland conceal an entity both ancient and perilous? A mysterious creature the locals have come to call the Beast of Bolam Lake. Situated along England's northern edge, on the very border with Scotland, Northumberland encompasses a sprawling landscape marked by wild, treacherous coastlines facing the North Sea. Though it spans nearly 2,000 square miles, this county is home to only around 320,000 people, making it England's most sparsely populated area. This rustic and solitary atmosphere offers a tranquil retreat from city life, where the daily hum of urban existence fades into the sounds of nature. Hunters, anglers, and nature lovers have long favored this place where wildlife flourishes. However, some experts suggest that this seclusion makes Northumberland an ideal refuge, perhaps even for beings who prefer to remain unseen. The Beast of Bolam Lake bears an undeniable resemblance to other elusive, ape-like beings recorded worldwide. Its described form shares much in common with the Sasquatch of Canada, the Bigfoot of America, or the mysterious Yowie of Australia. These creatures, among the most studied and debated cryptids, often appear as towering, hairy humanoids, with features blending aspects of both ape and man. With thousands of accounts of similar creatures across continents, some researchers believe these sightings may point to a hidden lineage of large primates still inhabiting isolated forests and mountain ranges from North America to the Himalayas. Some speculate these creatures could be descendants of the Gigantopithecus, a prehistoric ape that supposedly roamed the earth until around 300,000 years ago. Others entertain the idea that these beings are closely linked to humanity, perhaps representing a surviving branch from our own evolutionary tree. British folklore is replete with legends of dragons, ogres, and giants, but tales of wild men also permeate the lore. One of the best-known figures is the Woodwoes, a mythical creature from medieval England depicted as a wild, hairy man of the forest. This enigmatic figure appears frequently in medieval art and heraldry across Europe, but older English texts hint at even more primal beings, savage and brutish, hulking creatures that seem more beast than man. Could these stories be a distant memory of an ancient, primitive race, one that left an indelible mark on the earliest inhabitants of the British Isles? Or is it possible that what people are witnessing now at Bolam Lake is an entirely unknown entity, something science has yet to classify or comprehend? In 2002, a group of 4 friends from Newcastle decided to spend the day fishing for pike at Bolam Lake. They passed much of the day in relaxed enjoyment, sharing stories and laughter. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting golden hues across the lake, a chilly breeze stirred the water's surface. The men briefly debated whether to pack up and head to their car, but they ultimately chose to linger, savoring the quietude as the last rays of sunlight fell. It was then that something strange caught their attention, a shadowy movement within the dense tree line on the opposite bank. At first, it seemed like a trick of the fading light, but soon they discerned a clear form. A figure, towering and motionless, stood watching them from the cover of trees. Despite their unease, the men tried to reassure themselves that Bolam Lake wasn't isolated. With farms and small villages scattered nearby, they assumed it might simply be a farmer on an evening stroll. But as they focused more closely, they began to grasp the creature's sheer size. By using the trees and underbrush for reference, they estimated it stood nearly 8 feet tall. As they stared in stunned silence, the final sliver of sun slipped behind the trees, cloaking the landscape in dim twilight. And at that very moment, the creature's eyes appeared, 2 glowing red orbs that pierced the darkness, unwavering and fixed solely upon them. The sight was so chilling that the four men moved as one, quickly gathering their belongings, while struggling to maintain eye contact with the creature, whose gaze seemed to follow their every movement. Realizing they would have to pass through a stretch of woodland to reach the safety of their car, the men felt an acute sense of vulnerability. Each step back toward the vehicle seemed fraught with danger, as though any moment could bring the creature charging toward them. As if it could sense their thoughts, the figure began to move, emerging from the shadowed forest and into the lake's waning light. As the twilight deepened around them, the men could now make out the creature with stark clarity, a formidable silhouette cloaked in a dense layer of coarse, dark hair. It stood hulking in stature, and the sight of its massive fangs, gleaming in the dwindling light, struck terror into their hearts. A single glance was enough to drive them to panic, abandoning their fishing gear without a second thought. They tore down the muddy lakeside, stumbling and slipping, yet never daring to look back. The forest, strangely hushed, swallowed every sound but the frenzied rhythm of their footsteps. When they finally reached the car, they piled in with trembling hands, each filled with the silent urgency to escape. Although they initially wavered over sharing their terrifying experience, they soon contacted Jeff Lincoln, a member of the British Hominid Research Organization. Their efforts to keep the story quiet, however, quickly unraveled as the local press caught wind of their tale, branding the creature the Geordie Yeti. Public reaction was predictable. Most locals dismissed the story as another case of misidentification or attributed it to the fishermen's indulgence at the lake. Yet this encounter was no ordinary sighting. Unlike typical cryptid stories, often recounted by lone witnesses, here were four men sharing an identical, bone-chilling experience. Such consistency made their story harder to ignore, frustrating researchers who were accustomed to explaining away solitary sightings. This encounter, however, proved difficult to dismiss, as did the numerous sightings that soon followed. Each instance seemed to echo the last, as if this creature had a strange penchant for being observed by groups, a detail that puzzled cryptozoologists to no end. Roughly a year after the fisherman's unforgettable ordeal, another sighting surfaced. This time, it involved a woman named Naomi and her teenage son, David, who had gone to Bolam Lake for a peaceful outing. That particular day was marked by an uncanny stillness. The lake, usually alive with ripples, lay utterly calm. As they strolled through the parking area, David's voice suddenly cut through the silence, urging his mother to look towards the forest. Naomi's gaze followed his pointing finger to see what at first appeared to be a mere shadow between the trees. But David's escalating urgency forced her to focus, and she began to discern the outline of an enormous figure hidden within the woods. Dark, imposing, and unyielding, the shadow seemed to watch them with an intense stillness. Instinctively, Naomi shielded her son, her maternal instincts kicking in as she noticed his trembling. She couldn't identify any specific features of the shape before them, yet she felt its presence acutely. Her skin prickled, and an overpowering fear gripped her, though she fought against the urge to scream. Without a sound, the figure eventually seemed to melt back into the trees, leaving Naomi shaken but resolute in her conviction. In her recollections, she would never describe it as ape-like or beastly, but rather as a dark, supernatural force, a massive shadow that did not walk away but simply faded into the dense forest around it. This account added an eerie, otherworldly twist to the ongoing sightings. Naomi's description hinted less at a tangible animal and more at something shadowed in mystery. As weeks went by, locals claimed to encounter further signs of an unusual presence, a peculiar snapping of branches, primitive nests, and strange, piercing screams echoing through the night from the lake's vicinity. With reports reaching a fever pitch, cryptozoologist Jonathan D.S. and his team from the Center for Fortean Zoology decided to conduct a field investigation, spending several days and nights scouring the woods around Bolam Lake. Equipped with advanced tracking technology, the the team set up stations around the area, speaking to eyewitnesses and meticulously combing through the forest in hopes of capturing any shred of evidence. However, almost immediately, they encountered strange setbacks. Their high-tech equipment began to malfunction inexplicably, as though the very environment was resisting their efforts to document the unknown. On the second evening of their investigation, an ominous silence descended upon the forest as dusk approached. The typical sounds of birds settling in for the night and insects emerging were eerily absent, replaced by a profound and unsettling stillness. In this heavy quiet, the team members began to hear the faint sounds of something substantial moving just beyond their line of sight. They quickly directed their torches into the undergrowth, but the dense foliage concealed whatever lurked beyond. One team member decided to illuminate the trees with the headlights of his vehicle. As the bright beams cut through the darkness, 5 of the 18 team members, including DS himself, saw something utterly chilling. A massive, humanoid figure darting from one tree to the next with startling agility before it vanished once again into the shadows. For a heart-stopping moment, the figure reappeared at its original position, standing as if watching them, before it bounded off into the darkness. Though the entire encounter lasted only a few seconds, the image of the creature left an indelible mark on those who had seen it, while others could only grasp fragments of the sight, catching glimpses of a blur that defied explanation. As the days of investigation wore on, DS and his team grew increasingly perplexed, wrestling with equipment failures and unsettling signs that seemed to hint at an elusive yet undeniable presence. This strange saga at Bolam Lake, with its eerie sightings and unsettling encounters, continued to haunt not only those who witnessed it firsthand, but the entire area as stories, each more baffling than the last, emerged from the shadowed woods. The figure stood immense, towering over 7 feet, with a build that was both intimidating and unmistakably powerful. Each limb shaped with dense muscle and a broad chest that gave the sense of immense strength. Though the team hadn't observed those eerie red eyes that others had reported, they did stumble upon some peculiar footprints near their campsite. Curiously, the tracks didn't match the creature they'd just seen, hinting at a disturbing possibility that Bolam Lake might harbor more than one of these elusive beings, or perhaps even an entire family hidden within its dark woods. Despite several multi-witness encounters since that fateful year in 2002, British authorities have shown little inclination to investigate, let alone attempt to identify what lurks around Bolam Lake. Jonathan DS, the cryptozoologist who led the investigation, would later confess that he was just as puzzled as anyone else. He described the creature he saw as a near-human shadow, its movements too swift for any known animal, and its angular features reminiscent of characters in 1990s video games, blocky, almost unreal. Such an experience only fueled the unsettling question: what exactly prowls the secluded forests near Bolam Lake? The concept of a long-lost evolutionary link lurking in Britain's wilderness may seem far-fetched, but geological history hints that it might not be entirely impossible. Though today the British Isles are separated by the English Channel, this wasn't always the case. Just about 8,000 years ago, Britain was still connected to mainland Europe, forming a vast land bridge with what is now France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Early human ancestors, such as Homo antecessor, migrated across these stretches of land, reaching what we now call the British Isles around 800,000 years ago, during an era when massive apes like Gigantopithecus roamed the earth. Could it be that these ancient paths also allowed giant primates to cross, establishing hidden enclaves in the isolated regions of the British countryside? The idea is captivating, but poses the challenge of how such a population could survive for millennia undetected. Skeptics suggest that these encounters at Bolam Lake are the product of mass hysteria or simple misidentification. If the latter is true, it still leaves us with a mystery. What are these people seeing? The red deer, Britain's largest native animal, reaches about 4 feet at the shoulder and weighs up to 225 kilograms, far smaller than the reported 7 to 8 foot creatures. Others claim the sightings could be attributed to escaped zoo animals, such as orangutans or gorillas, but there's no record of any such animals escaping in the vicinity. Even the mightiest silverback gorilla, standing at most 6 feet on its hind legs, falls short of the towering stature described by eyewitnesses. And yet, the mystery of the glowing red eyes persists, with that eerie detail surfacing frequently across reports. Although nocturnal creatures like cats, raccoons, and owls can appear to have red eyes due to light reflecting off blood vessels in their retinas, none produce the vivid, seemingly self-illuminating glow reported by witnesses at Bolam Lake. Could it be that the source of this fearsome phenomenon is not of this world or even of this dimension? England and neighboring regions have long carried associations with folklore and supernatural tales, spirits, fairies, and mysterious energies. The island is interwoven with ley lines, where people have historically felt an otherworldly power. Perhaps Bolam Lake itself stands on a unique threshold, a crossing point between realms. If so, this could explain the strange variability in sightings, where the entity sometimes takes the form of a hulking, ape-like creature, and at other times seems a mere, shadowy wraith. Some speculate that the creature might possess the ability to shift forms, becoming a formless shadow when transitioning between these shapes. Since the early 2000s, however, sightings of the beast of Bolam Lake have become increasingly rare. Yet each time a documentary, podcast, or film revives the tale, a wave of anonymous locals, primarily Northumbrians, recounts their own encounters, stories they'd previously chosen to keep to themselves. Meanwhile, Bolam Lake remains a popular spot for those seeking a quiet escape, with its charming visitor center and a cozy cafe welcoming guests year-round. But even as the area draws hikers, anglers, and day trippers, its recent history as the site of so many inexplicable encounters lingers in memory. For now, the lake's reputation stands, a place of haunting mystery where reality and legend blend into an enigma. And as time goes on, it seems that no amount of skepticism or logic can fully explain the strange happenings of Bolam Lake.